It has to be done subconsciously. Because it's too sensitive of stuff to do consciously. It'll feel sometimes like, and I don't even know what I'm doing subconsciously right now. There's some stuff, if I'm aware of it mentally, I will find a way to outsmart it and sabotage it. So it has to be done outside of my conscious awareness. A lot of emotional processes I go through are like this, and I don't even know what I just went through until like years later, when it's already done. And also I know that when I'm transmuting something and it's coming to the surface and being diluted, and just like things have to be diluted in order to reach conscious awareness for me, because if things come to my conscious awareness like surface level perception at the potency and the intensity that they are subconsciously, it will fucking destroy me. It will ruin all logic that I have. My mind will get messed up. I won't be able to function. I won't be able to communicate. I won't be able to do basic tasks like think or have like executive function. It'll be too much. So yeah, when I go in that forest, since it's an isolated place, I don't know, something about it, because I feel like big isolated places are very spiritual in nature, especially if it is nature. Sometimes I will go in that forest all the time, like daily, and then sometimes it just like, it feels like I have no connection to it anymore. Like the charge between me and that place, it kind of just goes away, and I don't even want to be there. I don't care. And then I stop going for months or a year at a time, and then I come back, and then I have all these breakthroughs of stuff that it just wasn't digested down enough to the point where it could come up and be realized. Like I have to go through certain processes, and then I can go in there and integrate it. Like it was so fucking painful when I was coming to terms with all this stuff about generational eating habits and our psychology behind eating, and how like they wanted us to think it was beautiful and virtuous if we ate as little as possible and were as thin as possible, because our ancestors grew up in war times where the food was rationed and they couldn't afford it. So they want you to think that it's beautiful and a privilege if you can starve yourself and be thin, and then you don't take up as much space. And also the people in the older generations, because they didn't have medical care, a lot of people died in their youth, whether it was due to an accident that now we would be able to prevent it with surgery or medication or anesthesia, and they could do what they have to do. Back then they didn't have that, and a lot of people died young. They died in infancy, they died in childhood, they died young due to tragedies like just deadly injuries that they couldn't do surgery on without them dying due to pain. So when your spirit decides to leave your body, your body will not die unless your brain has registered that you are ready to die, unless you agree to die. If you do not want to die and you say, I am not going to die, and you truly, like, your soul is not ready to die, your brain will not shut down and you will survive anything. That's how it works. So I feel like the reason why a lot of people, what the fuck is that? Oh. Someone threw their cigarette out their window, and it was like, something was sparking right in front of me, and I didn't know what it was. thought it was a wire or something. But so it makes sense why back in the old times, this is all tying in with all kinds of stuff I'm saying, but back in old times, if people had to do surgeries and they didn't have anesthesia, the pain would be so unbearable when they were doing surgical procedures or rescuing people from injuries and stuff. The person's spirit would tap out and they'd be ready to die. So that's why in the older generations, when they had kids, they would have like 10, 15 kids at a time, because they knew that at least some of them, if not half of them or most of them, would die early. So I was talking to my client the other day. I wish my fucking window would roll up. I was talking to my client the other day about how when you die young, it's usually due to an accident, or it's usually due to something sudden, like a sudden illness, like say you had like sepsis or something. When you die old, it's usually due to an accumulation of your lifestyle choices. Like a lot of people who get cancer later in life, it's because they were smokers, they were alcoholics, they ate a lot of processed meat consistently throughout their life. A lot of people who die of weight-related stuff like stroke or whatever, heart attack, it's because of a consistent, regular choice that they've done all throughout their life to be unhealthy, and they didn't break it. So yeah, I was talking about how in the older generations they had so many kids because they didn't expect most of them to live up into their adulthood, to the point where they would just end up dying of accumulation, age-related diseases, habit-related diseases, because those take a long time to add up. They were anticipating people dying of, I don't know what they used to have, like measles, whatever they used to have, the fucking bubonic plague, whatever kids used to die from a while ago, before they had medical stuff. I'm cutting this audio because I don't want to put all of this on YouTube, but I started talking about all this stuff because I was talking to myself about how I went through a really intense transmutation process in the past year regarding ancestral trauma, regarding eating and body image and eating disorders and disordered views of our own body, because I was preventing myself from doing a lot of things in life because of all this internalized generational trauma regarding food intake, eating habits, and like everyone in my family has some version of passed down eating disorders, and all the psychological stuff that goes along with that is so fucking intense. Like, if you didn't go through it, you don't understand when I say it's so fucking intense. It's so potent. I'm talking about the actual generational trauma. Like, when I talk about generational trauma, I'm talking about epigenetics and how things that your ancestors experience get passed down to you in the DNA. And so you don't know why you experience an issue so intensely. This is also... This is also why we will be predispositioned to certain personality traits, to certain habits. Like alcoholism runs in families. You don't know why you drink so much. It's because your great-grandfather and your grandfather and your father, it's in your DNA. They were doing it, so you have a tendency to do it. Because when we're looking at things from an evolutionary level, humans are wired for survival. And whatever your ancestors found helped them survive is what gets passed down to you. And it is seen as evolutionarily advantageous if you follow in their footsteps and do the same thing and develop the same habits and the same mindsets that they developed in order for them to survive. I talked about this in another monologue that I did. It's the one with a red candle on it, how when we have addictions, it benefits our survival in many ways because our addictions are there to numb out things that we cannot handle processing at the time. Like, you notice how when people are grieving, they will turn to things like eating ice cream all the time or smoking a lot more or drinking to numb the pain, because if you tried to process... No, I'm not getting off it here. Well, if you don't let me over, I'm going to have to. All right. If you tried to process the kinds of stuff that you have to digest through emotionally and psychologically, even spiritually, in order to continue surviving, if you tried to digest that all at once with no buffer, with nothing to comfort you, with nothing to kind of like take the edge off, you can't do it. Like, if you're trying to digest through things like the raw animalistic nature of survival, of death, of how unfair and cold life is, you can't do it because it's too intense, it's too deadly, it's too just disheartening, it's too, I don't know what word to say. It's too fucking miserable. You won't survive it. So you have to take things in from the perspective that you could handle digesting through it. Like, if we were aware all at once of all the things that you have to do in order to survive your existence, it would be so fucking hard that you would choose to kill yourself. That's why I say, whatever addiction that you have that helps you survive day to day, usually, because look how big the human brain is. It's so fucking big. We are so psychologically complex that being alive is a psychological, mental, emotional, it's just such an intense experience. It's not just physical. So whatever thing you do to survive day to day, just do basic things that you need to do to stay alive. That is seen as evolutionarily advantageous, even if in the long run it ends up destroying you. Now that I've gone into this so deep, I don't even know where I was going with this, but everything I say usually comes full circle because I'd have to cut the audio. Oh yeah, I was talking about how people in my family, I guess this is like global, because when we went through the world wars, everyone had to ration their food. Everybody was having to go through a worldwide eating disorder because resources were so limited. So they had to promote this beauty standard that it is beautiful and more attractive to be thin, to not take up much space, to not eat very much, to always watch your weight, to do this, do that, because that's how you were going to survive the war. And if the entire world is experiencing this, it is going to be heavily enforced throughout the media, throughout beauty standards, and they're going to have to frame it to you in a way where you will be shamed enough to follow along with it, and you'll think it's because, so this even goes, you will think that, so when you internalize these beauty standards that came from like, I don't know, when did the First World War start? Like 1910, 1920? No, it was 1930. Yeah, it was. It was in the 1930s, I think. They would have to market this idea to you in a way where you think that you are more sexually attractive if you are thin, because it just acts on something in your hindbrain. It's just like reproductive stuff. Like, everything that's alive is seeking to reproduce. So if they can make you think that it's more reproductively sexually attractive to be super thin and to not eat very much and not take up much space, then they can just hijack your hindbrain and make you do whatever they need you to do so that they can have their wars, and there can be a famine worldwide, and nobody is going to like go fucking crazy, because everyone goes fucking crazy when there's a famine. So they have to make you think that you need to be fighting in these wars. It just goes so deep. I could talk about this. I could talk about this forever. Even though evolutionarily, thin women are at a disadvantage when it comes to childbearing, because it's evolutionarily advantageous for women to be thicker around their hips and midsection. It's seen as like, because it means that if there's a child inside of you and you have if you have more fat and more padding there, it's more protective for the child. But now you see where all of this generational trauma and all these crazy thin beauty standards that really went fucking crazy in the 90s, when like the heroin, anorexia model shit was really active. I feel like this is also why they encouraged women to start smoking cigarettes, because it never ends. I could talk about all the reasons why this is interconnected for hours, but I was talking to myself about how I was transmuting a lot of very deep, just generational stuff regarding eating disorders. And I was talking about also how when you're really going through a transmutation process of how much percent do I have? When you're going through a transmutation process of something that is generational, like you're undoing generational ancestral trauma, because it's epigenetics, it's literally in your DNA, and we always have the option to change our DNA, like change the expression of our DNA. No one talks about how fucking painful and reality shattering it actually is. I thought I was gonna die. I thought I started developing injuries and sudden sensitivities in my throat. I couldn't swallow. I couldn't hold my head up. I was transmuting stuff that was so survival oriented, and it happened after Grandma died. And Grandma was one of the women who really promoted eating disorder habits and body shaming and shit in me, and she just reinforced what was already in my DNA when she was doing that. Like, Grandma, she wouldn't even wear colored clothes. She would always wear all black, and she would always wear all rags, because she felt ashamed of herself because she thought she was too fat. And I don't know if I talk about this in this clip. When we are doing work on transmuting generational trauma, we do not transmute what our parents are going through, because the link between you and your parents is so close that it would be way too intense and it would be too premature. The charge is too strong between you and your parents. So whatever you inherited from your parents is passed down for your children at the earliest to transmute through. Like, whatever you're going through, that is a result of epigenetics. It is something that is coming from your grandparents at the earliest, because you can't digest through what your parents went through. It's too much. It has to weaken down first. It has to like be processed through another generation first. Like, my middle name, I'm named after my maternal grandmother, and I've processed a lot of stuff from her life. It's no coincidence when you're named after a grandparent or a great-grandparent. Some stuff that is embedded in the human DNA is so just fucking deadly, especially if you had an ancestor that actually died from something that now it's passed down to you. Some of the stuff that is in the human DNA is so deadly and has to be done with such care and has to be done and has to be transmuted over such a long period of time. Why did I just lose my train of thought? Oh, it has to be done over fucking 7 generations. It has to be done over a really long time. Some of the stuff that our grandparents went through and people who lived in like the 1800s and beyond, we're probably transmuting shit from Neanderthal times. Some of the stuff that happened is just so unbearable that one generation cannot do it. And this is when I talk about DNA level attraction. A lot of times when you're attracted to people and you don't know why, it's because their ancestors and your ancestors are compatible in some way, or you're helping, they sense on a primal level that you are genetically able to help them transmute through something that would have killed their bloodline. And your survival skills that you probably aren't even consciously aware of are aiding in the longevity of the survival of their bloodline. That's kind of how things work. Ooh, and I said I thought I was gonna die. What is that? Oh. I driving past the church right now. I went through a religious crisis, and my children, if I have children, are probably going to be transmuting religious trauma. I was in my closet, naked, covered in period blood. I was in a psychotic episode. I was rocking back and forth, just begging God not to kill me. Like, I was transmuting something from my grandfather. I know it was him. And I saw a vision of my father and how when my grandfather used to beat my father, he would try to instill the fear of God into him. And my father developed psychotic tendencies because of the religious abuse. Religious abuse impacts people so deeply because your ancestors were slaves to religion for generations. I feel like it does go back to the Crusades and like when the church controlled everything, and that traumatized the psyche of everyone. I feel like this is also why it takes a really long time for just the generational mind to transmute through the trauma that religion has caused humanity. And all the wars that have been fought over and how people have died over religion and all this shit. I feel like this is why when later, many generations out, when one generation can finally manage to intermarry with somebody from a different religion or different culture, it's such, energetically, it is such a massive and intense, and it's really, a lot of it happens subconsciously, just like a crazy like transformation of the DNA, and a lot of stuff happens in the following generations, just transmuting through ancient trauma regarding religion. But I was in the closet. Religion for me, I had to renounce religion when I was 15 because I was going to kill myself. It reached a point with me where I could not continue surviving if I was religious. And I've had to go through all kinds of stuff. Like my life, I'm a Sagittarius. My life is always centered around some kind of religious or philosophical or spiritual experience. That's what a big part of my life is about. I know I've gone through phases of being an atheist, of being extremely religious. I was into Satanism. I still kind of am. Astrology, other religion, all kinds of stuff, and all the fucking experiences that go along with exposing myself to all these other things and growing out of certain belief systems and kind of outsmarting the tactics that they use for religion. It's like, I feel like a reason why a lot of people are attracted to me is because of religious attraction, because it's something in the DNA. I could talk about this for a lot longer, but I think I'm going to cut the part in the beginning of this where I was talking to myself mostly, because that's just for me. But I started this voice recording out because I just came out of the forest. And I was just talking to myself about stuff that I realized about all the crazy experiences that I went through last year, and I couldn't make sense of them until now. Like, I go through things, and in the moment it's too intense for me to handle. I can't be aware of all the stuff I'm going through, otherwise I'll find a way to sabotage it. So my subconscious is smarter than me, and I have to consciously be unaware of what I'm going through until after I've gone through it. And then I can integrate it, and then I can have the full process. I feel like that's why I enter psychotic episodes sometimes, because I can't be aware of the magnitude of shit that I am transmuting and digesting through subconsciously, and still have things like motor skills, and still be able to have like executive function and speak. Sometimes I do. When I enter psychotic episodes, I speak in tongues that I don't understand, but I feel like everything will make sense later. And there's sometimes I feel like that's what psychosis is. You're going through something spiritually, or you're going through something subconsciously that you are not allowed to know about. So it turns out like it manifests as you appearing like you're disconnected from reality. You're just disconnected from the level of reality that you had access to before, and you haven't integrated what you're becoming aware of and all the stuff you're mastering now until after it's done. So there's like, it manifests as like a split between reality as you once knew it and the new reality that you are becoming acclimated to. I feel like this is also why I'm sure everyone goes through a variation of this. Sometimes I will start moving in ways that I don't understand. I'll start talking in languages I don't understand. I'll start using terminology I don't understand. I'll just have crazy urges I can't handle, because I'm growing into something that I consciously do not understand, but on a evolutionary, like hindbrain subconscious level, I understand it perfectly. And it's something, it has a lot to do with epigenetics and like transmuting stuff from older generations, and me being born with the instincts and the survival skills that my ancestors had. So I'm, in a lot of ways, I'm probably going through something that an older generation went through that aided their survival. I don't know what Nana did when she was 26. And it's more than just her. I think my great grandma Olive is talking to me, because I keep seeing that everywhere. I keep seeing that word everywhere and in olive colored stuff. I don't know what she was doing. I feel like grandma will be talking to my children if I have children. But one of the reasons one of the reasons, like, I used to believe, I had this thought suddenly that I'm not having kids because I just suddenly know that your ancestors just get recycled. So I know that my father will be born as my kid. But I didn't really understand what I was saying, so it just sounded kind of crazy. I think what I was really realizing is that it's epigenetics. Whatever my father went through is going to probably be lived out and passed down by my children. So in a way, my father really will be reborn as my child. If I don't get along with him, I don't want to raise him. I don't want to be his mother. It's too weird. I don't want to deal with my mother. I'm mad at her. So for a while I was saying, like, I'm not having any kids. I don't want to have any kids. I don't want you to be reincarnated through me. I don't want to fucking give birth to Uncle Sam. I sure as fuck don't want to give birth to Aunt Linda. I don't want to raise grandma. But it's just DNA. But then I also do wonder about when they say that spirits reincarnate. I do kind of believe what I was saying when I first started realizing this, and it was coming out in a very, like, choppy, unintegrated way. I do think that ancestors reincarnate through bloodlines, but their spirit has to evolve in a way, and you also have to have transmuted generational trauma in a way where that their spirit, the level of evolution that their spirit is at a match to the level of ancestral trauma that has been transmuted for them to even be like a fit to your womb at the time you would be incubating them. And I feel like this is where miscarriages come from, and this is where abortions come from. When a spirit is incubating in a womb that is not a match to the evolution, so either the mother's womb will kill the baby because the mother is more spiritually evolved than the baby that's incubating in her, so it will be a unbearable environment. I feel like that's why I had a miscarriage, because the baby that was growing inside of me was not strong enough, and that's just what I think. And so their spirit has to evolve in the astral world and in other dimensions in order to, like, tolerate the environment that they would be growing in. And then I feel like there's also cases where the spirit of the baby itself is stronger than the mother, and that has a whole different set of complications. Yeah, I'm almost home. I almost didn't make that turn. I'm done talking. Fuck.